Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating structural analysis of artificial intelligence, politics, and absolute physical reality. We're going to zoom in on a very specific, pivotal scene from June 2026. This is the exact moment where the abstract, high-level debate over who owns AI violently collides with the on-the-ground reality of local data center resistance. On one hand, you have the public being offered a share in AI's massive financial upside. But on the other hand, that exact same public is aggressively fighting the construction of these power-hungry data centers right in their own backyards. The source text we're looking at frames this as a brand new bargain. It's a bargain where the surface language sounds like public ownership, but the deeper, hidden question is actually about absolute command.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap. We're going to cover 1. The public ownership bargain, 2. Masks of the AI bosses, 3. Moral and legal legitimacy, 4. The state command skeleton, 5. The material reality test, and finally, 6. Reclaiming the AI vessel.
Starting with Section 1, the public ownership bargain.
So the public is essentially being asked to accept massive data centers, higher power demands, and severe water stress, all in exchange for a possible share in AI's wealth. To really understand this bargain, we need to trace the exact step-by-step transformation of the political language here, driven by 3 specific figures. First up, Bernie Sanders. He opens the scene by naming AI wealth as collectively produced, literally drawn from humanity's collective archive. He demands a 50% threshold, which means genuine public command and actual collective decision-making power, right? Then, Sam Altman enters as the figure of domestication. Altman accepts the phrase public equity. Now that sounds great on paper, but it completely preserves private command over the actual infrastructure. It makes Sanders' 50% threshold look extreme, while making Altman look incredibly constructive and reasonable. Finally, Donald Trump takes this newly domesticated phrase and morphs it into an American dividend. He captures it entirely in a national container. So watch what just happened. A universal moral claim about humanity's knowledge gets domesticated by Altman and then captured as a purely national populist benefit by Trump.
And this brilliantly illustrates the central mechanism of this whole scene: productive denial. Our source defines this as the process where a vast universal moral claim is narrowed down into a national vessel. Ironically, Sanders' opposition organically helps make Trump's exclusionary public ownership more palatable. By naming the universal human source of AI's knowledge, Sanders provides the initial moral energy, but then Trump narrows it, insisting only the American people should benefit. Just like that, the universal source, the open web, the global unpaid users, the entire planetary archive, completely disappears into the background. Critique is literally turned into adaptation. Moving on to Section 2, Masks of the AI Bosses.
Look, a society under this much intense pressure demands concrete faces to direct its fear and trust toward. The AI executive appears in several distinct masks, and we have to name names here because they function together beautifully, even when they're seemingly disagreeing. First, you have Elon Musk. He's the spectacular boss. He produces anxiety and founder mythology. We're talking robots, rockets, and an extreme concentration of wealth. He makes the idea of public intervention feel absolutely necessary. Then you have Dario Amodei. He is the safety boss. He produces responsibility, talking up controlled scaling and democratic leadership. If Musk makes intervention feel necessary, Amodei makes a corporate-state partnership feel prudent and highly ethical. Finally, there's Sam Altman, the negotiating boss. He produces the language of abundance and public benefit, shifting AI ownership from a harsh confrontation to a manageable policy bargain. They are completely distinct characters, yet they inadvertently work together as a unified system to drive massive AI expansion.
But here's the absolute crucial point we can't miss. These public faces intentionally hide the footprint. It literally doesn't matter if the mask is Musk's spectacle, Amodei's safety, or Altman's equity. Safety doesn't remove compute demand. Spectacle doesn't remove compute demand. Every single one of these masks eventually arrives at the exact same physical apparatus: an insatiable, overwhelming demand for chips, cloud infrastructure, massive amounts of power, and public permission.
All right, Section 3, moral and legal legitimacy.
So how does this massive, resource-heavy expansion actually get approved in the real world? Well, the Vatican and the European Union are absolutely central to this adaptation scene. The Vatican moralizes AI by wrapping it in the language of human dignity, labor, and the common good. Meanwhile, the EU legalizes AI through risk categories, transparency duties, and rigid compliance procedures. Now, while both of these seem like strict constraints, they actually function as institutional passports.
The Vatican's focus on dignity and the EU's focus on compliance essentially function to make AI administratively absorbable. Once an AI system proves it's compliant and moral, it gains a legal free pass straight into our everyday institutions. The raw power just walks right through the front door, wearing very gentle words.
Which brings us to Section 4, the State Command Skeleton.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happens if we completely strip away that moral and legal skin. What is actually running underneath all of this? There is a massive fundamental distinction between visible models and hidden command platforms. Public debate is constantly obsessing over visible models, chatbots that write your emails or summarize text. But the real institutional power is in command platforms, represented in the text by Palantir. These are completely hidden from the public eye. They don't just spit out text, they reorganize action, logistics, defense, policing, and vast bureaucracy. And here is the deepest, most critical weakness in the whole public equity bargain. Owning a few shares of stock in a chatbot company does not give you one single ounce of governing power over the operational state machinery running beneath the surface. The public might get a tiny dividend check in the mail, while private platforms entirely reorganize their public workflows behind closed doors.
Let's look at Section 5, the Material Reality Test. Okay, let's jar ourselves away from abstract software and state bureaucracy for a second and crash directly down to the physical Earth. Enter the ADCM, the Anti-Data Center Movement. The ADCM interrupts this entire high-level political scene right from the ground up. Because newsflash, a cloud isn't actually a cloud, it's a massive concrete building. And the ADCM fires off the exact, localized, material impacts of these buildings. They are fighting massive water intake and aquifer depletion. They are fighting the construction of substations and grid strain, which, by the way, usually gets financed by local ratepayers. They're fighting the endless droning fan noise at the property line and the secretive non-disclosure agreements pushed through at local zoning hearings. The ADCM forcefully grounds every single lofty moral, legal, and financial promise back to land, water, power, and actual permission.
And that leads us to this climactic, incredibly thought-provoking quote from our source text. The public may be invited to own a share of its own enclosure. Really think about that for a second. It perfectly captures the paradox we're in. A town might be told they are getting national wealth or public equity, but that local site still has to host the actual physical building. People basically become abstract shareholders in a massive machine that physically alters and burdens their own day-to-day landscapes. They benefit in the abstract while losing completely in the concrete.
Finally, Section 6, Reclaiming the AI Vessel. So how do we actually move forward from here? Well, we have to look at the structural problem of the word public itself. It's a word that carries so much weight, but it completely erases the vast differences in who is actually being impacted. To combat this erasure, the text introduces a really interesting concept called social GPT. Social GPT forces us to break down the smooth word public into specific enforceable ledgers of claims. Who are the missing publics? They're the world source archive creators whose knowledge actually trained the model. They're the linguistic communities whose speech was absorbed without asking. They're the data center host towns burdened with the infrastructure. They're the displaced workers and the millions of global users generating interaction value every single time they click or correct a wonky output. Naming these specific groups fiercely challenges Trump's purely national container, because a purely American dividend leaves the true planetary source of the value entirely behind. This brings our narrative to its symbolic conclusion with the concept of Aquarius. Aquarius is the symbolic horizon, where AI is viewed as a vessel for collective intelligence. It represents this massive upward movement from concrete social forms, our art, our language, our collective knowledge, into a brand new digital abstraction. But the text warns us against its capture, because everyone wants to capture this vessel, right? Altman wants to financialize it. Trump wants to nationalize it. Musk wants to personalize it. But seeing it as a vessel really clarifies the true stakes of ownership here. And we end with this absolute gut punch of a question directly from the text. Who truly owns the aquarium vessel? Who fills it, who drinks from it, and whose water does it actually drink? Because at the end of the day, public ownership is utterly meaningless unless the public actually commands the physical conditions of that ownership. From the smooth chatbot interface on your phone, right down to the industrial cooling pipes in the local aquifer being drained to run it. That's all for this explainer. I really want you to think deeply about who actually commands the hidden layers of this machine. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.